Welcome everyone, welcome back to Chris's Hangar. Today, Mike Victor uniform is still outside because we're going to do some work on it. I want to introduce to you Adam from FlyBoyz Aviation. And Adam's come up today from Michigan. And he's going to spend a couple of days with me in Chris's shop, and we're going to put on the Electroair Electronic Ignition.
You're going to love it. It's a big game changer.
So, going to drag Mike Victor uniform into maybe 1980 in terms of car technology, but you know, the 21st century for airplanes, because there's not electronic ignitions aren't that big yet.
It's grown, so Surefly has come around and Electroair is starting to come around. Each one has their advantages and disadvantages, and you know, as far as performance, this is actually the cheapest bolt-on performance game you can get in the industry today.
That's what I like to hear. So we need to go out to the plane and do a run-up, do some testing?
We're going to do a quick run-up, and then we're going to look at some engine data. We're going to do some bore scope, some preliminary installation stuff, just to kind of ease up on the longevity of the aircraft and see where that takes us.
Fantastic. So, out onto the ramp and we'll do a run-up. So what are you looking for here?
So first thing we're going to do, get it up to temperature. We're going to look at your RPM drops and see exactly where your mags are set now. See what your static is. So we're going to kind of do an overall comparison both now and when we put the ignition system in and see what your differences are. So once you put the single system in, when you go to do your mag drop, typically you're going to see about 100 to 150 RPM per side. When you put that electronic in, you're going to see at most up to 30 RPM drop on your electronic system. So that's going to be the driving force for your ignition source.
So is this system going to drive the top spark plug or the bottom spark plug?
So typically we like them driving the bottom plugs because we have what's called a waste spark system. So it fires on the normal ignition stroke, but it also fires on the exhaust stroke, so it will keep your valves cleaner, and it will also help with fuel scavenging. So any additional unburned fuel that's in your cylinder, it will burn that going out the tailpipe. So you're going to see cooler exhaust gas temps and slightly higher cylinder head temps.
Okay, so let me get this. Let me understand. It's going to fire twice.
It's going to fire twice.
On the power stroke and the exhaust stroke.
Correct.
It fires exhaust.
It does.
So step one actually is making sure everything's there.
Yeah, so first step in the manual, of course, have your manuals. Electroair does a nice job, and for everybody they send a kit to, you get a flash drive that has the manuals for your switch. You can see that. Those manuals are there. All the information you need, and same thing with the kit. They send you a flash drive that has all the manuals. That's got the flight manual supplement, the install manual, the warranty forms, and pretty much anything you need to know for doing this install. One of the first things you want to do when you get the kit, open it up, lay it out. Each engine is different, each box is different. So on these controllers, these are all custom programmed to whatever your install is. So first thing you want to do is make sure that the timing on the back of your box matches the timing that's on the data tag for your engine. And the reason I say the data tag...
What's the timing, Chris?
Timing is right, it's 26 and left is 28.
There you go. So with this one being a dual timing on all the 300s, you want to go for the one that's at 28. So you want to get the one that's going to drive your ignition system. 28 being more advanced than your 26, that's the unit you're going to want to replace.
Which one was 28, Chris?
Left.
Left. Is the left one the easy one to get to?
They're both pretty easy, actually. They looked easy, yeah.
This thing's a dinosaur.
Made by Case Tractors.
Yeah, it's old.
It's very old.
We can't get parts.
Nope.
How about we put something newer on it?
Yeah. The case magnetos are sold. You can't get parts for them. Nobody wants them as core value because they're pretty much boat anchors. I think mine is, I'm going to fly it down to Bill Roble at Hangar Rats in Texas and donate it to his museum of magnetos.
I think my grandpa's got a Case tractor in the garage that this will work in.
There's probably a top fuel dragster out there somewhere that would use it.
No. They're electronic ignition.
Are they now?
Most of them are going to that.
It's time to move an airplane over.
Let's do it. And a note on this style here, when you're pulling it off, you will need to get the blocks, which I did bring with me just in case. So you can't take and just put a regular screw and nut back on it.
Okay.
All the decisions. There you go.
There she
Throw it on
is.
the floor.
I was going to take it.
Had it right the first time.
So this just slots into exactly where the old magneto came out of.
Correct.
And what does this part do then?
This part here.
Yep.
So this part actually engages into the engine. That's what rotates the timing housing. So inside, there's a sensor. As it rotates, you'll see that here a little bit later. We'll time it so as it rotates, it picks up where the crankshaft is at for engine rotation for your timing. This is the important part.
So obviously all of the safety checks have been done. Most of the spark plugs have been removed. The wiring harnesses have been removed. There's no way that by spinning the prop, anything untoward is going to happen.
So we've got all the bottom spark plugs are out for safety. All of the top leads are off. The reason we're taking the bottom spark plugs out is with the Electroair system, we gap these at 36 thousandths instead of 19. So we put all brand new plugs in there that are pre-gap from Tempest. So I just inserted the timing plug into number 1. It's coming up on the compression stroke. So I'm going to throw my digital protractor on here and we're going to get this thing timed to 0. Alright, so come up and we kiss the pin, we can 0 it out. Spin around again until it kisses the pin one more time. .2, and 0 it out. Should be 92.2 on the other side. .1, so 0.1 off. Now, we want to split that in half, so we're going to 0 it one more time. The rotation is, so if it's between the firewall and the baffle, then you use the clockwise. If it's between the baffle and the prop, you use the counterclockwise.
Okay.
So it's kind of like the slick. You rotate it until the pin drops in place. And then, me being a pro, once we get this far, then I will pop this off, and I will actually look at the alignment of the sensor to the gear inside. And the reason we do that is because even once you've got it on there, you can still get about 3 degrees of rotation with this pin installed.
Yeah.
So that just takes out a little bit
So
of the
standard
ledge.
installer take the back off, or that's just because you want it? You're
That's
pro?
just because I'm a master
Yeah,
tech.
yeah. So right on. So and it's similar to the slick. I could show you a slick where how it does it, but it's nice for install. The Bendix mag is difficult because you have to rotate it, and it wants to hump over both ways, and you can go in and out a bunch of times. This is solid, so he's there, and there you go. And
Yeah,
it's
so it
simple.
just it locks it in place so I can get it in there without having to worry about it. And then with yours, because you've got that case and it's got those ears on it, you've got to get the slick install kit for the blocks. And these blocks will just hold this right down to the case over top of the studs. This will slide right into the hole. This in there nice and even. Yeah, because this, you can see how much play there is even with that pin in there. So by doing that, we'll kind of put this in place, and then I'll back that prop off. I'll bring it back in direction rotation, see where this is at as I snug everything in place.
Adam, so you've got the back off now.
Yep, so I've got the back off. Yeah, so what we're looking for is on that tooth, you got a flat spot, we call it a -2. And then we count back 11 teeth. So in the direction of rotation of the prop, and with here, the sensor is going to pass the flat spot, and then it's going to count 11 teeth on the back side of the 11th tooth, or trailing edge of the 11th tooth, is where we actually put the center of that sensor. And by moving the prop back and forth, I'm taking the lash out of the gears here, so as it's going through, it's constantly got direction on it. Because if not, I've got about 3.5 degrees of rotation back here that will be magnified with your timing. So that's how we really time that thing true, even by using the standard pin when we install it. Alright, so here's the difference in the Electroair plugs versus the standard plugs that we take out. So Electroair uses a Tempest plug, which is pre-gapped to between 34 and 36 thousandths. The reason we gap so much more is we're putting out 70,000 volts as opposed to a 10 or 12,000 volts that are coming out of the traditional magneto. So by doing that, now we've got more air and more fuel coming across the electrode, so it lights off and we get better, like a better flame front. And what we also do is we extend the range so it burns longer, so we do about a 12-degree rotation as opposed to the 3 to 5 on the magneto. So now we've got a lot more voltage and a lot more time with the sparks, which means a more complete fuel burn. And by doing the higher voltage, now we can burn a leaner mixture, which is how you can get away running a little bit more, getting a little more fuel savings out of your flame.
So this is the coil then?
Yep, so this is the coil.
Okay.
So there is a harness that would go from here in through the cabin and connect to the controller, and then each post is going to go to one of the leads.
Okay. And so this gets mounted on the firewall somewhere.
Yep. So this gets mounted someplace on the firewall. With some of the higher performance 182s where we've got structure, it's tubular structure. Sometimes we'll fabricate like a little bracket, and we'll use cushion clamps. We'll actually mount this right directly to the engine mounts, depending on how much room is available on the firewall.
Okay. So I know for a fact, since I spent a lot of time crawling around inside this plane, there's a bus bar here. So right here, there's a bus bar on the firewall side, but underneath it there is nothing until you get to about here, and there's a shelf.
Now, part of what we need to remember too is that down here in the bottom, you've got this connector where it's going to plug into. So wherever you put it, you've got to have enough room for that connector to come down and be able to make a turn, whether you go out the side,
Sure.
or that's where you do your firewall penetration, so it goes through the firewall.
Okay. There's nothing on the back side of that.
So I'm thinking we'll probably mount somewhere in here. So you've got good clearance for your battery,
Yep.
and you've got good clearance, so all of your leads that come out will have nice, clean routing.
Chris loves a good clean routing.
We like clean. Alright, so we're getting ready to hook up the ignition leads. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to come to the maintenance manual. Continental and Lycoming are slightly different on timing. So as you look here, Continental Tower A has similar to 1 and 2. Tower B is 5 and 6. Tower C is 3 and 4. So that's a key point to note right there, because the engines are different. So as you start to do stuff, you got to make sure everything is set right. Or the engine likes to go bang and pop, and you go, what's going on? So we're going to come over here, and I marked it right on the coil pack as a easy way to see where everything goes.
Well, if you want to try, so I tried.
Alright, so what we're doing here is we're putting space between all of the ignition leads, and we're going to do that both this side as it goes across the engine and around the back. And the reason we'll do that, as I'll show you a little bit later, is because with the 70,000 volts that we put through these leads, you really have to keep the spacing so that it doesn't arc between two leads as everything is bundled together like you would with the traditional ignition lead. Because we're burning everything completely, it allows that to start drying out. So now you've got a dry cylinder.
Okay.
So it dries it off, it flakes it off, then it's got to go someplace. So it either goes through your plug, or it goes out your exhaust, or a little bit of both.
So do you think there's enough in there to be of concern of fouling the plug, or?
You're going to follow the plugs, but it's, from what I'm seeing and from what I've seen from experience, it's going to be probably a couple hours before you're going to have too many concerns.
Okay, so Adam is borescoping the cylinders and looking at the pistons and the cylinder heads for buildup. This is a piston that Chris has taken out of some aircraft, and you can kind of see all that white stuff on there. That's just garbage that builds up inside the engine. Partially because it's not a full efficient burn. With the new ignition system, we'll get a full efficient burn, and this stuff will disappear. The concern is if there's too much inside the cylinder or on the piston, is that it will build up and foul the plugs, and then you have to take the plugs out, clean them, and put them back in within like an hour or hour and a half of first starting up. So Adam's going through everything and making sure that they all, to give us an idea of what to expect after about an hour or hour and a half of running. Mine aren't this bad.
Surefly, they're just starting to come out with that where you've got some advanced, but the advanced curve isn't as aggressive as what it is. So because these typically go on tight, I use just a little bit of dish soap as a lubricant and put just on the end. That allows us to just slide right on easily. And then it's non-corrosive, environmental friendly, so once you get it in place, wipe it right off and it secures it firmly in place. Then we will put the Viton gasket on it. And then this is one of the important parts when installing this. So in here you've got a non-conductive center core with a wire that's wound all the way around it. Now the spring has to go against the outer casing and that spring. So I pinch it just a little bit all the way around to kind of loosen it up a little bit. And find an opening where I can get the end of the spring started. And as you push the spring in, you'll start to hear or feel it as you go through where it's bumping over the ridges of the wire. And you inspect it to make sure that you didn't go in on an angle so you won't have the wire protruding out or seeing the shaft start to stick out the side. And you take the meter, disconnect the lead from the coil pack.
I tried it and I put it in wrong. It came out the side. It went in on an angle and it came out the side. So be very careful.
Yeah, because if you don't, it just causes your spark to arc between the spark plug and the coil or the lead, which is not a good thing. It doesn't get into your cylinder.
So as Adam's making up the harnesses, one of the things we need to check is the resistance.
Correct. So this is just kind of a way to make sure that the spring is installed right, it's got good continuity, and there's no breaks anywhere in the wires. So per the manual, we're using the red wires, about 5,700 ohms per foot of lead. So I just use a little alligator clip, put that on the spring, and I stick my other end down in and make contact with the place that the clip that hooks on the coil pack. I spit out the terminology this morning. So right now we're sitting 10.55 thousand ohms, so we're well within spec of what the book says we should have. So I'm going to use this old plug as an example to kind of show how these go together. So when you get it in there, you should have just a little bit of resistance so that you're not bottoming out. So right there the spring just starts to touch, and as you push it in, it makes good solid contact, and you squeeze it down with
So firewall forward is done.
firewall forward is done.
So now it's wire and electronic package.
Yep, so now we're going to blow a hole in the firewall to run the sensors through. And you've got this nice little cap right here, which is sealed in place. So we should be able to use that and maybe expand the hole so that we can get the connectors through. Kind of looking at the panel, we're going to remove the ignition switch and we're going to put the panel for the ignition switch setup right where your initial key was. Then you've got a little tray up underneath the panel where your glove box used to be, a bunch of racks and stuff on it. There should be enough room in there where we can get in there and mount that. So that's the next step. That's the final 2 steps with the breakers, and we'll be ready to play.
Part I like about this system is all of the electronics, the fiddly bits that don't like heat, that don't like vibration, are not under the cowl. They're inside the cabin where there's relatively small amounts of vibration and the heat is a little bit more controlled. So how many cables are we hooking up here? You've got one from the top.
We're hooking up 2. So we've got these 2 are the only 2 that we put through the firewall.
Okay.
This one here we run down to the coil. That also has a power wire to power up everything. That'll be on an independent breaker.
Yep.
And this one here goes to the pickup that we installed where the magneto was. So with this one, we want to keep this one routed away from any high power source. So like the ignition wires, we want to keep it away from there. Any of your battery wires, your starter wire, your alternator wires. So we really look at the routing with this one, which is why we typically put in the second hole. So down here, as you can see, you've got, this is your shunt. You got power coming up through here. You've got power coming up through here. So we really want to try to avoid any area that's going to have those high current items that could potentially create some interference with the sensor. It does have shielding on it, so it'll help with preventing that EMI from going back into the controller. But it's just standard practice that we try to do that. So for here, I wrap it around the vent line a little bit, so we'll zip tie that in place. Snap that one in, and this one we're going to kind of follow down here, and we're going to hook that right up here.
Oh, spark plugs fired better after I cleaned it. So there you go.
And the part I always dread, and I've spent a lot of time under that panel.
So because this is the old original ignition switch, what we're going to do is we're going to replace this whole thing with the Electroair panel. That's all going to go right here.
So why are there 2 breakers?
So we've got 2 breakers for a couple of reasons. So the first one is the coil pack. The power goes directly to the coil instead of going through the controller, and the second one is for the controller. So through the controller, the power goes from the breaker to the switch, and from the switch to the controller. So if you do that, then your coil has to take a minute to spool up and get powered up before it can fire. So your switch is kind of not going to work. So with this one, the coil is wired right directly to the breaker. So as soon as you turn your master on, now your coil's got power. So once you energize your controller and it starts to tell it when to fire, you've already got that. It's already primed itself and it's good to go.
Cool.
So much, Glen, drilling holes in flames.
Spend all that time designing a new panel, making a new panel, putting in everything that you think is going to be in it, and then within about a year, I've already drilled like 5 or 6 new holes, and here we go with 4 or 5 more.
You'll thank me later.
So, here's the big secret. Mike Victor uniform will no longer have a key. So a little bit hard for me to show you what Adam's doing. There's a shelf under the panel, behind the panel, that has all of the Dynon equipment. And so on the underside of that shelf, Adam is going to attach the controller unit, all of the electronics that make the whole thing work inside. The glamorous life.
switch. Okay.
Giver. So we just did a run up. Everything checks out. Minor adjustment to the dynon panel of how it talks to
Just the tack.
just the tack. But other than that, it runs fantastic, and there's literally no drop.
This is typically what we expect. So when everything is set up right, and in this case done right the first time, no adjustments, no minor changes needed, cowl it up and you fly it.
So it's well after dark. We'll cowl it up tomorrow. Chris and I will go in and we'll change the dynon in the morning and test fly it tomorrow and fly it back to Oshawa. And I'll give you all the numbers of fuel burn and so on and so forth, which is what everybody's looking for.
Got the engine data, so we'll do a before and after comparison and
Yep. Fantastic.
monitor.
Thank you very much for coming up to do the work.
Thank you so much for having me. Much appreciated.
Excellent.